You don't notice at first the moment when your life stops belonging to you. It doesn't feel like a door slamming or a sentence being passed. It feels like a series of small, reasonable steps that you are too tired, too ashamed, or too frightened to resist. You are told that it's temporary, that it's for your own good, that you've lost your way and need to be brought back to yourself. Then, almost as an afterthought, the language changes. You are no longer yourself. You are a case, a problem, a burden that must be managed somewhere out of sight. The building waiting for you does not look like a place where people are destroyed. It has clean lines, a front entrance that could belong to a school or hospital, and a name that sounds almost comforting when spoken aloud in a calm, official voice. The sign outside uses words like refuge, rehabilitation, care. The steps are swept, the brass on the door is polished, and the curtains in the front windows are drawn to just the right angle to suggest privacy rather than secrecy. If you passed it on an ordinary day, you might not even look twice. Inside, the air smells faintly of polish and boiled vegetables, the signature scent of British institutions that pride themselves on order. The first room you see is not a cell, but an office. A desk, a ledger, an upright chair positioned exactly where the staff needs you to sit. Your name is spoken, then immediately translated into lines of ink, date of birth, parish. Reason for admission rendered in a few clipped phrases that tell a stranger more about how you should be perceived than how you actually lived. A woman in a starched uniform looks at you with professional distance, and in that look you feel the first cold edge of something you cannot yet name. You realize quickly that this place does not need to shout to assert its authority. Its power lies in the certainty with which it speaks about you before it has even asked who you are. You are weighed, measured, questioned just enough to fill in gaps in the forms. No one asks what you wanted, what you feared, what you were running from or towards. Those parts of you are not useful here. What matters is whether you fit the categories that justify your presence. Troublesome, ungovernable, fallen, nervous, unstable, a danger to yourself or others, an embarrassment to the people who signed the papers. You hear those words in fragments as they pass between staff, and each one scrapes away a little of the way you used to think of yourself. Clothing is the first layer they strip from you. The garments you arrived increased from travel, holding the last traces of your real life in their seams, or taken away to be stored or disposed of, depending on how generously the institution defines your future. In their place, you are given something that fits every woman and no woman at all. Rough fabric, neutral colors, the kind of outfit that could be called modest or practical or hygienic, depending on which report is being written. In the mirror, if you are allowed to see one, you already look less like yourself and more like a role being filled. Names come next. Officially, yours is still yours, inscribed at the top of your file in careful handwriting, but in daily life it begins to fray. So you become Miss plus your surname, spoken with brisk efficiency. Or you become a bed number, a ward number, a line on a chart. The staff do not need to know who you were before. They need only to know where to put you and what tasks to assign. Other women call you by your given name at first in whispered conversations after lights out, but some of them have been here long enough to forget their own birthdays, their own streets, their own mothers' faces. And you can feel the gravitational pull of that forgetting working on you too. The British institution that didn't kill women did not need to. Death would have been too obvious, too crude, too difficult to excuse in annual reports. Instead, it specialized in a slower, more respectable kind of annihilation, the erosion of self under a constant trickle of rules, routines, and gentle, unyielding judgment. Every part of your day is structured. You wake not when your body is ready, but when the bell dictates. You stand where you are told to stand, sit when you are instructed to sit, speak only in the permitted spaces and tones. Prayers, if they are part of the regime, are not invitations but obligations. Your soul is something to be evaluated, corrected, managed. The words used, repentance, humility, obedience, are rolled out with such regularity that they stop sounding like spiritual concepts and start functioning as levers. Work is presented as therapy. You scrub floors, peel vegetables, wash laundry until your knuckles split in the cold water. Officially, this is to build character, to keep you occupied, to help cover the costs of your upkeep. Unofficially, it is a language your body learns more quickly than any sermon. You are here to be useful, not to be whole. The outside world sees only the surface. Local newspapers, when they mention this place at all, speak of a vital institution providing moral guidance and shelter to women who have lost their way. Politicians visit occasionally, walking through the corridors with that detached air of people whose decisions will be implemented by others. They are shown the chapel, the neatly made beds, the sewing room where a carefully selected group sits with hands folded just long enough to be witnessed. They leave satisfied that Britain is, as ever, dealing with its social problems in a firm but compassionate manner. No one brings them to the room where a woman sits staring at the wall because she has been told firmly and repeatedly that the child she carried will never know her name. No one introduces them to the woman whose signature appears on her own admission papers, written under such pressure and confusion that she barely remembers holding the pen. The horror here is quiet. There are no public executions, no dungeons, no blood on the floor. Instead, there is paperwork. There are locked cabinets filled with files that reduce whole lives to a handful of paragraphs written from the institution's point of view. There are meetings where your future is discussed in absentia by people who will never feel the consequences of their decisions. You hear your story retold in the third person, stripped of nuance, until even you are not sure whether you are misremembering the details. Bit by bit, the gap widens between the person you know yourself to be and the person described in those records. It is in that gap that you begin to disappear. The institution does not need to convince you that you are worthless. It only needs to make it easier to live as if you were. Little rules, consistently enforced, do the rest. You must not speak at meals. You must not linger in the corridor. You must not ask when you will be leaving. You must not question the fairness of a punishment even when you know exactly why it is unjust. Each broken rule earns you a mark, a note, an entry that will later be used as evidence that you were difficult, resistant, ungrateful. You start editing yourself preemptively, removing anything that might be used against you, opinions, jokes, memories expressed aloud. You keep only what is safe, and safe becomes a smaller and smaller category. Outside, people say that this place is not so bad, that at least the women are fed, clothed, housed. They repeat phrases they have heard from pulpits and podiums. Discipline is kindness. Structure is salvation. Hard work builds character. They do not see the cost at which that character is purchased. They do not understand that a body can be sustained while a self is systematically unmade. They do not realize that when you walk through those gates, you are not just being removed from your home, your job, your scandal. You are being inducted into a system whose ultimate success is measured not in deaths, but in how thoroughly you can be erased while still technically alive. You notice the changes so gradually that they almost feel like choices you made rather than conditions imposed upon you. At first, you still try to speak as the person you were before you arrived, using words that once felt natural in your mouth, but the responses you receive create a new rhythm that soon replaces your old one. A nod instead of a conversation, a quiet reprimand instead of curiosity, a rule recited instead of comfort. You learn that asking for anything, information, reassurance, fairness, marks you out as someone who needs to be corrected. If you remain silent, you stay invisible, and invisibility here is the closest thing to safety. The staff's language becomes your weather, steady, gray, unchanging. They talk about you in tones that are neither harsh nor kind, but clinically distant, as if you are a puzzle they must solve without investing in the outcome. Words like wayward, uncooperative, restless, or unsuitable are spoken in the same tone someone might use to describe a broken hinge or a loose thread. When they discuss your progress during weekly evaluations, they never use your name, only your role in their system: resident, girl, woman, inmate, patient, depending on which justification they prefer that week. It is strange how quickly you begin to internalize these definitions, how icily your own mind starts using their vocabulary as if it has always belonged to you. Inside the dormitory, the silence is heavier than the blankets. The women around you are at different stages of vanishing. Some still try to whisper small acts of rebellion, tiny jokes, fragments of stories, memories spoken softly enough to avoid attention. Others have long since given up on trying to express themselves, having learned through repetition that anything personal will eventually be dismantled, corrected, or used as evidence against them. When you look at them, you see futures you do not want to claim, yet cannot fully avoid. One woman in particular stands out. She's been here longer than most, although she does not seem to remember exactly how long. She folds linen with the precision of someone who once took pride in her work, but her eyes lack any sense of direction. They are open, but they do not land on anything. When she speaks, her voice is soft, as if she is reciting lines from a play she was forced to learn. She tells you her name out of habit, but by the next day she cannot remember that she ever told you. Her identity has been worn down like stone underwater, not shattered, not stolen, but eroded through endless contact with forces she could not fight. The routines of the institution are presented as neutral, as if they are simply the natural order of things. Morning prayer, work duties, supervised meals, quiet hour, inspection, lights out. Each segment of the day is designed not to harm you directly, but to reinforce the idea that you do not belong to yourself. Even rest is managed. You sleep when told, wake when instructed, and any deviation is treated as evidence of instability. If you cry at night, you bury your face in the thin pillow to muffle the sound. If you are heard, you will be asked to explain your emotions in the morning, as if sadness must be justified or permission must be granted for its existence. The building itself becomes another instrument of control. Doors that look ordinary hide locks that click shut the moment you step through them. Windows are positioned high enough that you cannot see the world outside except as slivers of sky. Hallways are long and echoing, amplifying the sound of footsteps so you can always tell when someone is approaching. There is a particular room near the end of the east corridor, a room you are not allowed to enter but are often made to pass. The door is always closed, but the stories whispered by the other women tell you enough. It is where confessions are extracted, where staff decide whether your behavior is improving or worsening, where decisions are made about privileges you will never truly earn. Inside that room, you are told women learn what it means to be reformed, a word that grows more sinister each time you hear it. The system thrives on ambiguity. Nothing is stated plainly. You are told you may be released when you show progress, but progress is never clearly defined. You are told that obedience will help you, but the goalposts shift unpredictably. One day you are praised for quiet compliance. The next, you are scolded for lack of engagement. You are caught between demands that contradict each other, and in that contradiction lies the institution's power. If there are no clear rules, you can never confidently claim to have followed them. If you can never be sure you are doing the right thing, you can always be accused of doing the wrong thing. Shame becomes a constant companion. It settles on you like dust, clinging to your thoughts until you cannot tell whether it originated inside you or was placed there deliberately. You feel ashamed for being here, ashamed for not adapting quickly enough, ashamed when you comply and ashamed when you resist. The institution understands this perfectly. Shame is quieter than punishment, cheaper than force, and far more effective at reshaping a person from the inside out. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of yourself reflected in a window distorted by the glass. You look like a version of yourself sketched by someone who has never met you, but has seen enough women like you to approximate your features. The longer you stay, the more that approximation becomes accurate. Staff members rotate through their shifts, each one performing their